Hello guys, welcome to my video. My name's Jamie Johnson and this is it's my remote viewing journey. This video signifies the 2-year journey I've had so far with remote viewing, and hopefully I'm just going to go over anything over the last 2 years of any significance, and just give a frank conversation or a chat about the process and everything involved in it since I've started, and hopefully it might align with other people, or people just want to have a different perspective when they're on their journey. And yeah, I hope this provides some food for thought, and we can go from there. So the intro, basically, what I've got first to say is a bit of a declaration. Is I've only been doing this for 2 years, guys. I'm not a professional. I'm not an encyclopedia of remote viewing. I have just been doing the basic course, and I've just been practicing ever since. And I let my experience guide me, and just provide some of these videos of my journey so far. So this is only 2 years of many years, I'm hoping, of the changes of this experience, really. So the declaration is: I'm a beginner, I'm not a pro, I know nothing. Take my advice, information with a grain of salt. This is just one person's perspective, and I believe that a lot of people have their own journeys to go through and understand about themselves. So on that note, let's start talking rubbish. Let's start talking about remote viewing and my experience so far. So what have we got here? Done the declaration, perspective, advice, my experience. Just some things. If I get all preachy in the video, please ignore me. I'm just overzealous, maybe. I do get excited about a lot of stuff in this, simply because it's just an amazing experience to have. So, and a lot of this stuff, I'm going to try and queue up a lot of videos that I've already done as examples of what I'm talking about at the time, but we'll get into that when we do. So yeah, in this intro we'll be going over the process, the different senses inside the process, like touch, temperature, texture, and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully you find it informative or interesting, and hopefully it adds part of your experience as well. Maybe you can align with it, or have similar experiences and you just want someone else's opinion on it, or someone else's perspective, not opinion. And let's get into it. All right. First things first is the process. So the process 2 years ago, my process is very much a TDS remote viewing process. It's a modified version of that. It was the first process that I learned. After that was CRV through Laurie's website, Intuitive Specialists. So TDSRV, a modified version of that, early stages. But as far as when I first started, I knew of the process, but I didn't really understand it. And my early process and page was very much an admin page, or just a few stats on the page: date, name, target, intent. And the first process basically was just probe and sense anything. There was no sense topics. There was no text to touch at that stage. There was nothing. There was no approach to anything that I could use. It was basically trial and error and see what would come up for me. And the early stage process was very much an ideogram and me probing lots and lots of times, and with every probe I had an impression that I had to describe, and that carried on for a very long time. The reason it started out that way, even though I knew of the processes and how they categorized all the different impressions, was that I didn't really understand the categories. Like, if it's a type of impression, I should put it here, or a type of impression, I should put it there. My motivation was, don't filter anything out with any judgment yet. Just feel and describe. Describing things felt really important to get right at the early stages, so you could carry that on through to the later stages and you would have a better technique at it. But just describe everything that you feel. And I did. So early process was ideogram after the targets, target numbers, ideogram, and then just probe the shit out of it. And what do you feel? And just start exploring with your body around impressions that you might feel. What it is today is very much what it is in the process. So yes, it is a modified version of the TDS version, but it's growing. It's not the original, but it's been modified to include some materials that I think are associated with growth in my abilities. And I think that's important too, is to have that opportunity in your process to grow with your learning. Anyway, but that's beside the point. The process today is very much what it is normally. We have categories, we have impressions that we can put inside those categories. Now we get more than those categories, like when you touch, you're feeling an array of types of touches. So it grew from having no categories to 5 categories to 9 categories to whatever categories you're going to have going forward. And I think that's the important part, is that you can grow with your abilities going forward, and you can match and growth with them as well. So early days I've got here, it was just probe and describe anything and everything, whether it was real world or site from this target site. The most important part is that you just record everything as far as the process goes. That is so important. Don't filter, don't judge anything out, just practice your describing and your descriptors that you use. You'll understand as you practice through the process, 2 years on, your descriptors are a hell of a lot better than they used to be. When you first start out and you're just experimenting with words, does that fit? Does that feel right? 2 years on, you're picking better words that actually are appropriate to the impressions that you get. Whereas before, you're sort of hit and miss, you're sort of trying words out. Is that sort of appropriate? I don't know if that word's appropriate for that kind of impression. So you're always searching and you're trying to nail down these impressions with the correct labeling, I suppose. Next is what's next? So understanding the process allows you to. Okay, so this is a good one. If you understand the process, you can share your work with others and understand theirs. It sort of made a hell of a lot of sense when I participated in some targets through some Facebook posts, and it was really good. But how do you share it if you don't have a technique or a format in which to share your information with? And that's why I think that's most king about the process. If you understand a process, you can share your information or your data with anybody else who understands that process. And they can look at it. If it's a modified version, they'll still have the gist of what you're trying to do and how things are working, because a lot of the techniques that are used are pretty similar across the board. So if you know one technique, you may know a lot more because it's similar to your own sort of modality. But know a process. It allows you to share your info. It allows you to read other people's info as well. And that experience, sharing info, is a really good experience. Do it if you can. It breaks you out of that mold of breaking into the community. But it allows you to share information with other people. And that's the important part. So the other topics that we're going to talk about in this process We're going to go over we're just talking about the process now. We're going to go through touch, text, temp, color, smell, hearing, and snapshot. We won't go very much in the ideogram, trace, and declare sort of stages. They're sort of like the A, B, and C, the A and B stage. A is sort of like the trace, describe as you're tracing the ideogram feelings and stuff that you may feel. I don't write down the description of the drawing anymore. I basically write down the impressions that I feel in that space. The declaration is really identifying individual objects in that ideogram that I can probe individually and then do the remote viewing session across them. And C is basically the sensors, and D is sort of the snapshot stage for mine. The first of the topics is touch. Early days for touch was basically once I got through the having no topics, I started to set up topics in order to encourage impressions in those areas, or at least try and invoke some senses or impressions in that space. Cold, it wasn't hot and cold, it was hard and soft for touch. Hot and cold was for temp. So yeah, the touch side was hard and soft, and yeah, I would just probe it, and whether it was hard or soft, I would cross out the one it wasn't, and then go through the normal process of trying to describe the impressions after that. Early days touch, what have I got down here? So early days touch was really anything and everything that I could feel internal to my body. So a lot of the senses overlap each other anyway, so you might get temperatures when you're doing touch, or you might hear things, you know, they all intermingle, and it's not just a one thing, it's everything. So I would get, so early days of touch would be a mix of temperatures, would be textures, would be all of that all mixed into one, and that would come out as touch. So differences in temp might come through in touch, differences in heaviness, thickness, density, but not in any great detail. It was sort of like my arm felt heavy, or a big chunk of my arm felt solid and dense. So you got it you got the impressions in a big way. There wasn't any sort of intricacies or details in regards to the impression that I got. I don't think so. Thickness, real structural type stuff, but nothing intricate, nothing that I could say, oh, it's something. It just felt like a wooden board, or just a block of something, or heaviness of something. There wasn't really any more detail more than that in the early days. And I would have one-worded answers in the feedback, or in the answers for the target. Some would hit, a lot would miss. The hits, yay. The misses, it's alright. Keep practicing, you get better. So touch early days was pretty much anything and everything that I could feel when I probed the ideogram. What is it now? So touch for me now, it's very much, it hangs around the sides of structural elements. So touch does things like heaviness or weight, whether something's heavy or light. Touch gives, you can tell the shapes and curvatures of things, the shapes of large objects. You feel curves, you can feel stacking, things interlocking, you can feel beams of support inside houses, that sort of thing. Heaviness, so I've had a lot of castles in my targets in my videos. They all exhibited a heaviness. It was sort of like your body becomes the castle, and you can feel the rocks and everything sitting in the dirt, like it's being pushed in because it's so damn heavy. You can, what else? what things are made out of. So the target could be made out of something. What I've got down here is made of, density and granularity. So really that points to the physical nature of what the thing's made out of. I've had a few pubs, Irish pubs in my targets, and I can feel the walls of those targets. They're made out of rocks with grout in the middle, and they're all stacked up on one another. So I've had where I felt the walls, I can feel lumps in my arms. That's, I believe, represented the rocks. You can also feel in between these lumps real grainy, sandy-like textures and structures, which I immediately thought grout or sand, that sort of nature. But that really points to the imagery of density and objects and that sort of thing, how you interpret those impressions going forward. So I seem to have picked up those physical elements of targets really well. What else have I got? For touch, sometimes I have impressions or insights of height. For some of my targets, if they're extremely tall, I will feel structures in my head. Most of the time, anything that sort of structures in my head usually means it's a very tall structure, and the only reason it's in my head is because it's friggin' tall anyway. That's my real basic understanding. It's in my head. It must be pretty tall to be in my head, sort of thing. But scale and remote viewing, it's not as obvious as that. So height, you can get some height insights. I call them insights and impressions. And another thing in touch that I get is positional information. So I think it was the Cathedral Notre Dame, and when I did a touch, it was focusing on the back entrance, and I could feel like something was way behind me. Like I felt like I was the front entrance here. You can feel the facades or intricacies of some structure, but in the back of me, like maybe a meter back, you could feel something like something's pulling your attention about a meter back behind me physically, but really it's the target site and it wants you to pay attention to something that's behind the cathedral, sort of thing. So positional information, you can get that from touch as well. So touch is more of a all-around type of thing. It can involve other senses like temperature and all that sort of stuff. It's not limited to a specific set of impressions or insights, really. It's basically the first stop of the adventure, and he's the first up. So he's there, just whatever you're giving me, I'm going to put it on the paper and I'm going to detect it all. So touch is sort of your go-to guy. And that's about it for touch. So early days, is there any progression? So as far as touch progressing, or the progressions in the touch space, when you first start out, you feel just differences. You can feel differences in densities in your arm. You know it's not your arm, it's the target, right? But anyway, when you first start out, you're not really feeling as much differences or impressions in your body. As you get better at calming your mind and clearing your mind a lot better, your connection to the remote viewing technique or the session gets a lot better. And as you progress, you connect a lot more with the impressions. You get more detail coming through. I know that for a fact that happens because I'm on that journey. So yeah, just keep practicing touch. It just, when you first start out, everything's not so clear. There's something there, you can detect it, but it's not quite specific or detailed enough. As you progress through this journey, things become a lot more clearer. Things become more obvious as to what they are, because you're learning as you go. So I think in the touch journey, a lot of these things that I talk about, like heaviness, shapes, density, height, positional, they all get better in the detail that they give you because you're better at it. And there's not as many distractions that you have when you first started out. So it really is just continuation and keep going, and you do get better. But yeah, positional, height, density, shapes, heaviness, all structural elements, physical elements, touch seems to be quite good across. So yeah, that's touch. Alright, we are now on texture. So texture is our next guy on the sensors front. Usually comes after touch in my process. And early days texture. So early days texture was very, it was okay. It wasn't one of my strongest sort of things. I really associated it with touch, just with a focus on the surface of objects or targets or whatever. And I think that's probably the most appropriate way to describe it. Really is just another touch, but focusing on the surface of things. Excuse me. And in the early days, I would do rough and smooth. So I would put touch, rough and smooth, probe, one it is not. So for structures, it would usually be smooth, and I would get that. With rough, we're talking about trees, bushes, really non-real naturey type stuff, fluffy, bushy type impressions coming through. Those sorts of things. So as far as the early days was, it was just describe what you felt after that, and try your best at describing what you felt. What have I got? So what did it feel like? So I've got a little point here. When I was doing textures, the impressions would come out mostly on my arm, and I think I focused that, or subconsciously focused that on purpose, because this was my probe arm. This is an arm that's just lying on the table, and I'm looking at it, trying to focus impressions on it, or impressions would appear or come from it. And I think it's sort of like a working space. You can put impressions on, and hey, I can feel stuff. So textures. As far as what I feel now, it's basically just a lot more detailed with the descriptors, a lot more appropriateness with the descriptors I fit with the impressions. They're just, I'm just getting better with the descriptions. It's not like I'm feeling anything different. Everything just seems to be in more detail. Consider it olden day black and white compared to color TV and high def. You know, the granularity, the detail just gets better as you keep practicing. Like, you understand, you seem to flow a bit more with the nuances of your ability a bit more. Maybe you get relaxed in it and you flow with it a bit more. So the descriptors I use today is very much what I used in when I first started out. So flat, bordered, bushy, cold, wet, slippery, smooth, hot, radiating, thick, cover protection, hot arm. So a lot of these things talk about a function rather than a descriptor of its surface as well. Like a lot of buildings that are the Irish pubs again. When I would do the sessions on those Irish pubs, you would feel amazing warmth on the inside, but you would feel really, really cold on the outside of your arms and the back and your sort of chest, but everything within the space would be absolutely warm. So you would know that it was a building that's situated somewhere friggin' cold. And that's what it felt like. So texture doesn't always give the descriptor of what the thing is, but it can give the impression of what it does. So it protects inside, and I think that comes out in the session too. So it's not always bushy, it's not always smooth and hard because it's structural. It could be glass now, it could be metal. You can the progression now is you can, rather than just it feels hard, it feels those very plain type of descriptors. Textures can be now wood, and you can almost feel the grain of wood. So it's like you can feel wood, it feels like wood, but there's a grain to it. You feel like glass, because sometimes glass has that weird feeling to it. It's not plastic, it's not metal, it's glass. So you're starting to feel the differences between the types of material that you're touching. And I think you get better at that as you practice more, but it's like recognizing the densities of the materials that you're targeting or probing. So you're starting to like the minute detail of these targets and the impressions and textures are just coming through a lot more in the insights that you get, or the impressions that you get. And we would get a lot of overlap with like temps and touch and all the other ones as well, because when you're doing things like buildings, you're going to feel temperatures, because it's all part of the story, right? The whole reason it feels like protection is because it's cold outside and it's warm inside, and that gives that feeling of protection from the elements. So all that comes through. But as far as texture goes, what does it feel like now? Just more of the same, just more specific and detailed with the descriptors. Am I getting better at describing things? Yeah, it's really up to you how detailed you get. But it's really just the quality is dependent on me describing it more appropriately than what I would do normally. Like I can carelessly go, it's that. I'm not making much or utilizing much of the detail to describe it better. So I think you need that sort of discipline as well, where even though you feel the difference, but you won't describe it any better than what you feel it is. It's almost like you're doing a disservice, like you got given something, but you're not making use of it. So if you can, push your vocabulary. Go read those dictionaries of descriptors and stuff, thesaurus even, and just pick up words, pick up more words. Anyway. Textures, yeah, so really nothing much in the texture space. You're just getting more detailed, you're feeling more detail from the target, and just gets better. So really, there's nothing much else. We have temperature. So temperature early days. So when I first started out doing temperature, it was one of the easiest ones to do, because you're feeling hot and cold anyway, without having to do a session. So all I did was really pinpoint and understand my targeting or my awareness around temperature in my body. So it was going, okay, this is hot, boom, this is cold, boom. And there weren't even impressions. So this is even for trying to understand temperature and how to use it in the session. But it was okay, because if you felt your arm was hot, you'd say it was hot. If you felt a part of you was cold, then it was cold. The progression was when I felt distinctively hot all over, and I could feel cold parts. That was sort of the first signs of, hey, that's different to every part of me. My awareness could detect it. The next progression after that was, hey, I'm pretty cold, I'm lying in my t-shirt, and it's all cold around me, and something's really hot. You can feel a hot part of my arm when you're doing the session. So it's like, well, my whole body's cold, but this is when I probe, it gets really hot. And that was the basics of the temperature. The next progression after that was, if you were cold, you felt a hot part. If you were hot, you felt a cold part. The next progression after that was you felt hot and cold in that same body part. It was like, now that's not natural. You know that something's going on there. As soon as you feel that sort of thing, you go, what? So buildings, protection from outside. you got a cold outside and a hot inside, you can feel both temperatures. You can feel the cold trying to get in from the target site, and you can feel the warmth inside this area, as far as the pub was concerned. So my early days temperature was, write down temperature, hot, cold. First probe, boom. Is it hot? Is it cold? Cold. Cool. Cross out hot. Do a probe. Describe everything else after that. That all worked well for a long time until I got hot and cold. So it wasn't a matter of crossing out one. It was a case of, which one do I cross out? No, I can't cross out anything. So I had a hot arm, cold leg. I described the different temperatures in different body parts around my body. And so progression after that, it was sort of like, oh wow, I'm getting both parts. And then after that, it was basically, my legs started getting cold. Like most of my impressions used to stay in the top half of my body. And I didn't really send my awareness to what my feet were doing, what my legs were doing, and that sort of stuff. But as you progress, you naturally go into those areas. And I started getting impressions from those areas as well. Cold feet, hot legs, all those things. So early days temperature, really easy, describe everything, even if it's not target related. Just get into the practice of describing your impressions or differences in your body accurately, because that will get better in time. You'll be able to notice. If you try and notice things at the beginning stages, everything becomes easier in the latter stages, I think, simply because you've put that detail at the start. It's only developed from that moment onwards. But temperature now is, what do we got? It signifies sun hitting the targets. It signifies a beautiful warm day in a field somewhere. It signifies flows of energy around the target. So there could be wind, water, rain, anything where things are curving around targets, surrounding it, and you can feel currents and waves of energy from it. Feel that a lot with temperature. What have I got? You can also sense living things as well. Sometimes in sessions you can detect living objects or living subjects, because you feel a warm inner glow. That seems to be the common thing that I've found with myself, is that you have this inner glow. I've detected in some sessions where I can sense two of them when there's been two people in the photo, and I've sensed it's like living things sort of give off a warmth, a glow about them, sort of in my chest area. It's sort of like it emanates. Anyway, but yeah, that stage of putting the hot, cold and crossing out one which isn't only works up to a point. And I got really stuck when I started experiencing both of them, and I had to separate them out and let that journey develop as well. With temperature, you can detect energy, movement. Movement usually has like engines and that sort of thing. You can detect heat. So you look out for those sorts of things. People generate heat. The sun definitely generates heat. You can detect the sun hitting on targets on specific sides. You can detect streams even in target sites where you can feel like water running down your back, sort of in a like from one end to another, and it feels like water running down your back, and then you find out there's a stream inside the picture that signifies, and most of the time for me it signifies that stream or a path inside the picture as well. Especially like roads and all that sort of stuff, they show up as temperature differences inside the target site. a road might appear on a piece of land or something like that, or a fence, and you can feel a structure that goes right across your body, which is of a different temperature, and you're thinking, wow, what is that? So you just recorded something going across your body. I've had many a session where that is either a path or a road or a fence line of the target site. And so yeah, so temperature is probably the easiest but the hardest, because when you're first starting out, you're feeling everything. You're feeling real world, you're feeling targets. You're probably not even feeling targets, you're just feeling real world, and it could be wishful thinking, you don't know. But as you progress, you will start understanding what things are providing that impression of heat inside your target. So for me now, it's sun, it's energy, it's motors, it's fires. Typical heat sources, it's not like, oh, it's of something. That energy will generate heat, and usually that's around mechanical energy or some sort of kinetic energy or something like that. And you understand where it sort of fits in all that sort of puzzle movement, that sort of stuff. So temperature differences not only mean something's hot and something's cold. Temperature is sometimes it can just give you a differentiation. Like, it doesn't have to be hot in order to give you an impression of temperature. It can be just different, of a different matter. So metal against wood or against something else. Those can also invoke differences that can show up in temperature inside your body as well. So always remember that temperature doesn't always mean hot and cold. It just means differences between the types of matter that you're detecting in the site. Really, that's what I think anyway, because they also show up as temperature differences as well. Maybe that's just the maturity of my ability. Maybe it's not mature enough to say, well, it's not a temperature difference, it's a density difference, and this is the type of material that I haven't mapped yet. Like, I can't always say that's wood or that's steel or that's, but I'm starting to know the differences in between them all. And sometimes I get grain inside wood, and you can feel the flow inside the wood as well, and I associate it with the grain of the wood. But yeah, you just got to go with the motion, go with what you think, and develop those stories as you go along. And so yeah, so as far as temperature goes, it's all about energy and flows with temperature for me. Colour hasn't changed much from the start. The colours bleed out. I probe the ideogram, and I have the expectations of colours coming back from the target site. So when I probe, colours start bleeding out in my mind's eye, and I just notice them and I write them down. The progress that I can let you know of what has happened since is when you first start out, you see all the colours. It doesn't matter what the target site is, you're going to see all the colours. Write them all down, and as you get better, you'll start writing a lot less colours after that. My impression of what happens is that our targeting for intent is not very good at the start, and colours, I think, brings that out in an obvious way. We try and send our consciousness to go and find something out. In this instance, it's colours. And we get colours. Yay, we get colours. We get lots of colours. So, and now we're at the point where, we're going to get anything and everything, because our targeting system is pretty immature and crappy, and, everything comes in. Got to feed the dog, got to wash my bed, all that stupid stuff, wash my bed. Anyway, but it means that we're unfocused, we're not really focusing on anything, we're not focusing on the intent, we're just sort of giving it, here's 5% of my awareness, you can go and do that job, and I still got to figure out doing shopping and all that sort of shit on the other end. But as you practice, those colors start coming down and they become more accurate. So now the color technique at the moment is the colors seem to be more accurate to the target. I don't get as many colors as I used to before, and the colors that do come up for that particular target are quite apt towards that target. They are those colors. The only other difference is that sometimes the colors are now taking on the shape of something at the target site, or something that they represent at the target site. So it's one example is the airport. I'll bring it up here somewhere, and the airport was totally grey, steel, white, greys, blacks, all that sort of stuff. And when I did the color impression, I got balls of orange. And you know those pedestrian crossings where they had the little blinking ball and you got the black and white pole and pedestrian crossing, everybody crosses. It found that in the picture, and when I did the color for that, I found balls in my visual image. And since then, I've been trying to keep track of the shapes that the colors have, because I think that they're trying to align themselves with the shape technique and give me a better impression of the site. But anyway, that's only what I'm just starting to notice now, that colors are taking on the shapes, or taking on shapes, not necessarily shapes at the target site. I don't really know. They are sort of similar, but really, you know, it's just a case of record it anyway and watch how it develops going forward. So the sense topic, smell. I didn't have an early session smell session. It wasn't really important to me to smell. I didn't really focus on anything with it, and I grew into it. So early day smell didn't really happen. Once I started concentrating on smell, or started getting smell impressions, I did start creating its own topic and registering any impressions associated with smell into that space. So early day smell wasn't even smelling anything. Well, it was detecting humidity. It wasn't even about smelling. So my early impressions were targets from Laurie's website, around walking around forests and forest walks and that sort of thing, and you can smell the thickness, the humidity, the heat sometimes of those walks, and you could breathe, and you could feel how soupy and thick it was to try and breathe in those situations. That it was so you know humidity, it gets so hot and it's like, it feels like a soup, and you could feel that was my major first impression with smell. And I didn't even notice it before. It could have been happening to me a lot more times before that, but I just didn't click. And I suppose that's the thing, when you do have these impressions, you're going to have them a couple of times before you start, oh shit, that's that smell. What is that? You can smell some differences. It doesn't feel like real world. Oh, it's real thick, it's heavy. It feel real closed in and congested. And my sinuses got real clogged up, and it was thick. And yeah, there was a forest walk with heavy humidity and all that sort of stuff mixed into the mix, and that was my first. The smells now. So smell has developed into several areas. Basically, how touch was sort of the structural elements, those sorts of things. Smells sort of turned into an environmental sensing faculty. What do I mean by that? So let me tell you what smell means now. Smell means now it's environmental conditions. It represents environmental conditions around the target. That sort of thing. So what I've got, warm or cold conditions of the day. You can detect if it's warm or cold by the smell. It's like one of the impressions that I get often in a really warm day is I can imagine myself, when I probe something, I fill it with warm, breathe easy, I call it breathe easy air. And I imagine myself standing in the middle of the field taking a big breath of beautiful, warm, sunny day air. And whenever I get those impressions, that fills me up. And I think, wow, warm, breathe easy, open, breathe easy air. And I write it down every time. And it usually is right on the button. But you can tell, like a really wet day, moisture-laden day, cold day, sunny day, just by smelling it. Humidity, moisture in the air, smelling it. You can tell if you're in like crowded spaces as well with smell. It's like when everything's open, everything is unhindered. When you breathe in, it's like everything comes easy, and I suppose that's where that open air, breathe easy comes from as well. Things don't feel hindered when you're sucking in that data, when you're breathing in, when you're doing the probe. But when you're in a closed room, it just feels like you're closed up. It's that feels like a crowded place. You can smell complex smells. There's lots of smells around. Too many to describe. So I just put complex greater than 2. You can detect how closed in environments are. And that's why I think smell has now turned into this environment thing, because I can tell if it's a closed-in space or if it's an open space. Humidities and moistures, you can smell warmth, and you can smell cold. And yeah, so if you can sort of imagine it where you take in a deep breath when you're probing, I imagine that I'm sucking in all the data from the target site up my nose, and you're getting environmental settings from the target site, and that's how I treat it going forward now. I don't get it every time, like a lot for all these impressions. I don't get them all every time. This is sort of an accumulation. I suppose this is the database that's been created. You remember the ones that you do more often, and so you will reference them and refer to them often as well, and that's part of your training. So sensing environmental, smell of things. Okay, so I do get smells now. It's BO is favorite, food's another favorite. What have I got? Food, flowers, sweat, people. Oh, sweet, you can smell sweet things. People, open areas. You can smell plastic, even glass and metal has its own tinges to them now. When you get them, it doesn't smell normal. You can sense differences in it, and you can't place it. I suppose that's the one that's ready to be mapped in your head. So smells, very much important now. Sets up the environmental space, and comes in with other impressions as well. Smells just like everything else. It overlaps with everything else. Sometimes you only get a good picture when there's 3 or 4 impressions from different areas, and you go, oh, that's a house because it's cold outside, it's warm inside, everybody's singing, blah, blah, blah. So it's a story at the end of the day, not just a thing that's lying down, waiting to be described. So what else have we got? All right, we have got hearing. So hearing here, early days of hearing. Hearing, it wasn't another one that I was really a fan of. It wasn't one that I was going to. My main go-tos were the touch, which is physical impressions inside me, and the visual acuity, visual technique to try and get some images. Because they were sort of my go-tos to sort of, is this working? Do I recognize anything? Anything else was sort of like, that could have been anything. But if I saw it, I would believe it. So yeah, hearing early days. What have I got here? Yeah, it wasn't really about hearing at all. When I started getting hearing introduced into my process, hearing was more about locating objects around my target. So let me explain. I didn't hear things a lot in my sessions, but when I invoked hearing, I could hear differences around me. So one of the examples is I could, if I was a person next to a house or a cliff, which some targets you are, when you're the person, you can hear, even though when you're doing the session and you want to do hearing, you would always hear something coming from this direction, like real crispy, something felt refined, it felt more clear, clarified, and more obvious. And on this side, it felt dull, something felt dull, it felt ignorable, you know, it wasn't really there was nothing to really perceive as such. But on the other side where a cliff would be, it would be really clear that something was there and defined. And what I associated that down after I did a few sessions was I was hearing sound bounce off objects inside the session. Like I could tell where there were big objects around the target, simply by I could hear the clarity of those objects, like sound was bouncing off them and they stood out really noticeably. And that's how it started out. So hearing wasn't about hearing anything. Even hearing would invoke feeling things on my body. So I could feel not objects just around me, but on me as well. So I could feel glasses whenever the target had glasses on. I could feel it when he had a hat on, glasses, hat, gloves, clothes, even facial beards and all that sort of stuff. You could feel them. So it began to be more of a hearing, began to be more of these are the things around you. So the person's got glasses, he's got clothes. You might have a puffer jacket and you could feel the warmth and how you sort of felt like a Michelin man sort of thing, because it was so big and bulky, and you know, you felt like that guy in Ghostbusters walking down the street. That's what hearing was. It wasn't about hearing anything from the target side. It was about placing objects from the target in relation to yourself to where that object that you're describing is. So hearing. Glasses would show up. I would feel the glasses down the side of the head and across the bridge of my nose and my eyes. You know, you'd feel those impressions. You would feel hats from sports people and or utility workers, people who are in service of others. And for protection, they need helmets and gears and ropes and all that sort of stuff. And you can feel that stuff. And that's what hearing did for me. It made it quite obvious that the person either had equipment on and was wearing it, or it was a description of elements around the target in relation to the target. So it might someone over there or something over there, something behind us, that sort of thing. So it was more positional. It was here, I could feel it here, so it was there. I could feel it here, so it was here. So it was very positional in its nature of its feedback as well. So that was hearing. It wasn't even about sounds. Sounds came later, and sounds don't really come through like sounds. The way I can describe it is sounds come through as recollections. So an example would be I did a target of an old street, had some buskers, side of the corner, next to churches, old derelict buildings made out of concrete, like real history. I think it was in London somewhere, I don't know. But when I did the sound, I heard the street. I had a memory of when I lived in London and it was pissing down with rain. I could hear the cars. It was trafficky as hell. I could hear people, walking along, and I felt that. Got to get home, that droll of walking home. I felt that. And when I had that experience or that impression, I wrote down that experience saying, it's car, street, dum 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 dum, and just listen to them all. And it was appropriate. It was totally towards the feedback that I was doing towards the target. And I think that's how sounds come to me. It's like when I probe for a sound, the sound is in my memory, and if it's appropriate, it'll let me know that memory is a recollection of, hey, I remember that, and I write down the recollection, and that will be the description of the target site. So it's like a reference. So yeah, it's sounds. Yeah, sounds really weird for me. I don't really get sounds. I get memories of sounds. A lot of the targets that I have, I miss a lot of sounds of, like bands and that sort of thing. I don't. So the progressions of sounds for me is I get memories of sounds. Now, as far as physical noises at the sites, I do get an impression for that. And they show up as like bumps, like boom, 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 boom. They're like little reactions in your ears, like when your ears are doing funny noises and that sort of stuff. I get those sounds, and what I usually get accompanying with that is the fact that someone needs to listen. I need to listen to somebody. Like somebody wants my attention so much that they're playing something so loud that I get the physical sensation. I don't get the sounds coming through, but I get the physical sensations on my eardrum. That's what it sounds like. That's what it feels like. It's like boom, 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 boom. And I can feel activity in my eardrums while this is going on, but there's no sound. But I know something's going on because I get this urge to want to hear something, and I can hear this and this urge to hear something, and it feels like my attention is going out of my ear, and it's going out in a like wide arc. It's like I'm searching for that noise in this thing, and my drawings are usually my head with something going out, trying to search for something, and I believe it's me and my attention looking for the sound that's happening in my ear physically. So I don't get, it's really weird. That's the only way I can explain it. And maybe someone out there understands that you might get the physical traits of something that's happening at the site, but you don't have the actual energy like the sounds or that sort of thing actually happening to invoke those sort of feelings in your space. It might be happening at the site, but when you're here, you don't have those sounds, but you get those feelings, those same feelings going on as well. That's me anyway. That's how I feel. So I know when the site's usually got something really loud going on, is that I can feel activity in my ear. I can't hear anything. Maybe I haven't just attuned that or developed that part of the technique to actually listen to what the sound is happening. I can only feel the physical aspects of it at this stage. It's something. I didn't notice the heavy drum beat sounds when things were noisy at the target. Not until much later. It's like the Irish bands, pubs, and that sort of thing. It's not. I just thought, my ears just sort of reacting funny during the session, and I just ignore it. No, actually, it's invoked by your session, and you should record it. Everything, and that should be a rule. If you experience it, record it, no matter what. And yeah, don't blow it off as something else that's unrelated to the session. Actually, it's related to everything's related to that session. So hearing is now important as a physical type thing. Hearing now, I don't hear noises as such. I have memories of noises that I hear that go, oh, it's a street. Oh, it sounds like noisy band, or it sounds like a band. It sounds like a big chime. But they're memories of those things. They're not senses. They're not physical attributes that I hear. They're just memories. So it's like, oh, I remember that. That memory of the bell popped in. Oh, bell, da 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 da. You write those down. The association game. So that is hearing, and there's, hearing's turned out really good, especially for ARV. We allocate numbers to certain impressions. So me being me, I seem to have a good ability to recognize physical things on my body. So a lot of my numbers are just physical things on my body. So I've got a boy with eye patches, I got some guy with a mask, or a lady with a mask, and all that sort of stuff. I've got a mannequin with a half mask on one side, and I've had her impression come through quite well for a lot of my numbers, and she's worked out really well. So I suppose once you find out what you're kind of good at, you use them in those sort of games to help you develop your abilities more, and hopefully you might be earning some money out of it. Anyway, so hearing, that is pretty much hearing. So it's all about structural elements again, and it's about sensing objects around the target site, and it's about sensing things on the person's body or on the target as well. So yeah, what can you do? Yeah, all you can do is do more. Another thing I wanted to say about hearing is, not only does it do like the target, but you can feel things on the inside of targets. An example is the Antarctic dome that I did a couple of weeks back, or months back. It's actually a storage shed, and it's got storage stuff inside it. When I did the impressions, I could feel stuff inside this object, and that's the other great thing about the structural element side of things. Not only do you get to feel the outside shapes, but also the inside shapes of things. Yeah, that's it pretty much. So that's hearing. Hearing is a very important part of my session, and I can only hope it gets better. All right. Okay, last topic. So this is snapshots. This is by Aziz from Farsight. His video of Remote Viewing 101 is in my playlist, and he talks about the snapshot technique. I think it's blackboarding or snapshot. I think it's snapshot. But anyway, perfect technique. I love it. It works. Just adopt it, get used to it, and have fun with it. The snapshot technique is my only visual technique in my sort of color. No, it's not. Colors is visual technique, and yeah, snapshot is really good because at the end of doing every other sense, I'm hoping that my connection with the target site with remote in that session is at its strongest. So when I do the snapshot, I hope I get as close to the target site or something on the target site as possible. And one of the important things about snapshot is whatever shows up, you draw it. No matter how ridiculous it looks like, if you can capture it, you draw it. No questions asked. Just do it. Many a time have I been given presentations or visual images and I've not drawn them down, and only to find out later that they're in the target site. Because I just sort of palm it off. That's, my visual technique is not fast enough. Also reading or looking at the visual techniques and trying to create an instant impression of what it could be is not as great as it should be. So it's not like you can go, that's this, that, boom, 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 boom. Just draw it as you see it. Don't add to it in any way. It's a indicator of your skill and ability at that time. Don't try and put too much into it of your consciousness. You're only going to corrupt the subconscious side of it. So just be honest with the feelings that you get, and that means whatever image you get, you draw it down. If you get 4 or 5 images, do them all. There's no harm in doing that. Well, I don't think there's any harm in doing that. All you're doing is practicing on how to draw what your mind's eye shows you. and the better you get at that, the better your images will get. I don't know if they'll be of the target. Your images will get better regardless. So early days, what can I say? Snapshot, when I started doing it, I fell in love with it. A lot of my early impressions sort of came out. A lot of stuff doesn't align to the target site, but it doesn't matter. As you do it more, a lot of the stuff aligns to the target feedback. As you get better at targeting your intent at using the visual technique. So yeah, I also found something, because is it Tachyotomata by Lynn. Lynn has this app that you can, it shows flashes of images, and you only get it for like half a second, a quarter of a second, and you got to try and capture as many details within that picture and sketch them down. It's a great game to play with the kids if your kids are up for it. So you have a game, picture flashes up, boom, describe, give them all a piece of paper and start describing and see who gets the most, identifies the most objects in that picture. Great game. But it sort of allows your awareness to sort of go flash, grab as much detail information from the picture and suck it back in and just go. So the more times you do that, the more flow you develop in acquiring and expressing. Just it comes better. When you first start out, it's more about, oh shit, what's this? Ah, you write a couple of words. But as you get better, it's sort of like your techniques around reading, your visual acuity and what you pay attention to becomes easier and better. And then the expressing part of relaying what you have in your mind to the paper becomes easier as well. Sort of like flows better. It's like typing. At the beginning, you're just like, but as you go, it becomes a flow. It doesn't even become a mechanical step. It just becomes a flow where you hear words, you type it out, and you don't even have to think about it. But at the start, you hear them, you think letters individually, piece, your spelling words, THE space, QUICK space, you're granularizing everything, but it becomes a point where it just becomes a feeling and a flow. And that's where you want to be, it becomes a flow and it governs itself. So Snapshot now, what have we got? Pretty much the same. I don't know if the technique's improving or not. It's basically a function, and I think it does the function really well. What I think I need to improve is my intent on targeting the site, because sometimes I get drawings that aren't of the site. I can admit that, sometimes I get drawings, sometimes I don't. But I think depending on your intent will determine the accuracy of your session. So, yeah. So the main point is no questions, just draw it. That's basically it. So trust in your visual process. Draw what you have, what you've been given, and go with that flow. The first picture may not be the same or might not be appropriate. The second might not be appropriate, but that practice and that intention of targeting what you want becomes more normalized and seems to flow better. I think that's how it sort of worked with me. What have I got? Your visuals, more selections or options, changes noticed, more of target than not of target. So yeah, you get better targeting the target than not of the target. Sometimes you're just drawing shapes. You're not drawing intricate drawings. It's not a competition of detail. You're getting aspects or insights from the site. So it could be designs, it could be images of certain things. It doesn't have to be telling the whole story down to the nth degree. So I get a lot of shapes a lot of the time. I don't get too much detail. Sometimes I get a lot of detail coming through where things might be a little intricate. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. It's just trust in what your mind is showing you is appropriate. If you can't sorry. If you can't associate the feedback or map the feedback back to anything in your own space, keep it there as a reminder. Might not happen now, but may happen later. What have we got? Snapshots of other areas. Okay, so when you do your visual snapshot, you might have things that are not of the target. I've had many examples where I've done it of a certain area, Edinburgh, I think, and I've had like pictures of windows of churches. I've had cats come up for certain places around, is it Scotland? And there was nothing in the feedback about this particular place, but I was getting cats of all sorts of descriptions and insights from the target. And I went there on Google Maps, and apparently they've got cats all around this place, and that's why I was picking them up. And I was thinking, why the hell am I getting all these cats? So if you don't pick it up in the target, go there and Google and see what you can find. I've been to other areas in Europe where certain places, and I've got all these sort of crisscross things, and nowhere was it in the target. The target was a hotel or something, but outside the city or in that same township, there's like a forest walk sort of thing, and they've got these elaborate sort of things, and I was drawing that, and that was more interesting to me. But I wouldn't have known it. If you don't get your hits on your sites, just visit Google and see what you can associate with those sorts of pictures going through. It's you know, it all fits the pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, it's not a hard yes, hard no, not a hard no, and it may not suit everyone's criteria of a hit and miss, but it doesn't really matter. What you're trying to figure out is why you got those pictures, and if you can find out that those pictures existed at that site, that is enough for me. Anyway, you're connecting. Just your targeting is a bit off, man. You know, oh, I'm targeting this house. No, you're targeting over here. It's much more interesting. All right. What else have we got? So yeah, so even though you may not get stuff from the target site, go on Google, find out if there's anything more interesting about that site. You may have targeted all that stuff. The general overview that I can really sort of say at this moment in time is I think it takes 2 years just to get a grasp of what you can do or understand your limits and where you need to go. By no means. So after 2 years, I still can't figure out what a specific site is specifically. Like I can't tell it's the area on a map or anything like that. I'll only have insights of the things at the site. I don't really get too many sort of big picture sort of things and say, hey, it's Antarctica or anything, you know, all those label names or anything like that. I'm pretty much only concentrating on the physical aspects of my abilities still at this moment, like the basics, understanding what things feel like. The visual technique side is not really too important. As long as it's still hitting, I believe that it will develop as I practice more. And my acquisition of images hopefully will get better. I think there's much more room for improvement, but you know, it's not just pictures, it's smell, it's hearing, it's everything else as well. It's not just one thing that you need to concentrate. It needs to be as a bundle, really. So whatever. So the differences are I still can't figure out what the target site is or the different taskings that are across it. I'm very much still in the basic stages of feeling, of understanding, of mapping my impressions to what I think they could be. Still in that learning journey. I understand that everything is very individual to oneself. So I don't know if this is what others will actually go through or their journeys might be like. I think they'll be totally different, to be honest. And even though I have been practicing for 2 years, I'm only just really understanding the basics of a lot of this stuff. That's why I haven't really pursued any sort of advancements or any sort of shortcuts around things. It's sort of like you don't feel ready enough to move on to the next stage because there's still so much to be discovered in the ground level type stuff. Like I've only just formed what movement might be, which is tingling, understanding shapes and that sort of stuff, and I still can't sort of determine the whole shape of the whole current site. There's still lots to learn. So as far as 2 years, I think it's really sort of to establish yourself, to understand that you can determine what's real world, what's not. You understand those differences between the two. You still don't know. I still don't know everything about anything. I'm still on that learning journey. I don't pretend to understand everything, but I have a lot of confidence in what I do. When I think about how to do things, there's not a lot of doubt. I tend to follow my intuition a lot more. It's but on that note, the next video will probably be on the matrix and just some simple explanations on what that matrix means to me and what plans I have for the matrix going forward. Alright, thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks. See you later.